Imagine this, the Roman Empire, the most powerful military machine of antiquity, marching relentlessly across Europe. The legions advanced over conquered nations, while the world trembled under the weight of their strength. No one could stop them, not even themselves. But what happens when the enemy doesn't come from the open plains but from the heart of a dense forest, where the fog blinds the eyes and the terrain becomes a deadly trap? In the year 9 AD, Rome faced a disaster that would change the course of its history. Once, Rome thought nothing could stop its advance. But on a dark night, deep in the Germanic jungle, that invincibility crumbled. 3 Roman legions, along with 20,000 men, marched toward their last battle. And who was the enemy? A German prince, raised among them, who knew their tactics better than anyone. How did this happen? Why did a people who had witnessed Roman power up close decide to face the beast itself? Today, we will discover what happened in the Teutoburg Forest, the place where Rome was humiliated, where 3 legions were annihilated, and where the fate of the Roman Empire was altered forever. Don't go away, the best is yet to come. This is just the beginning of a story that will make you see Rome in an entirely different light. At the height of its power, the Roman Empire sought not only to conquer but also to assimilate the lands it invaded. Rome's ambition was greater than ever. It wasn't just about extending borders, it was about imposing its culture, its laws, its way of life. Germania, a wild and mysterious region, was on Emperor Augustus's radar, who saw these lands not just as a challenge but as the final piece to consolidate his domination. However, the Germans were not simple subdued peoples. They were a group of warrior tribes with traditions deeply rooted in their independence. They lived in a land of towering forests, where nature became both ally and defense. Unlike the Romans, who relied on military discipline and organization, the Germans fought with a free spirit and, above all, with the knowledge of their own territory. Rome had all the power, but something crucial was missing: the understanding of their enemies. The Germans were not just adversaries, they were an entirely different culture, and that difference would be what made the difference in the Teutoburg Forest. Arminius was no stranger to the Romans. In fact, he had been raised in Rome, a prisoner of war turned citizen. He spoke Latin, understood Roman customs and tactics, and served as an officer in the legions. But beneath his appearance of loyalty, there was a spark of resentment burning strongly. Born in Germania, Arminius had been handed over as a hostage when he was a child. Rome treated him like one of their own, giving him privileges and military training. He earned the trust of Verus, the Roman commander, who saw him as an essential ally. However, Arminius's true loyalty was never to Rome. His real destiny was to free his people, and for that, he needed more than just forces, he needed an opportunity. That opportunity came when he won Verus's favor, who trusted him completely. Arminius became his military advisor, and it was then that he began to weave his web of betrayal. Knowing Roman strategies inside out, the strengths and weaknesses of their army, he planned an ambush that would change the course of history. The autumn of 9 AD arrived with an air of confidence for the Romans. Under the supervision of Verus, the 3 legions marched toward their destiny, unaware that they were walking straight into their doom. The Roman army, one of the most disciplined forces in the world, moved with certainty, believing their mission to be simple: suppress a minor revolt in the north. But Arminius had other plans. Cunningly, Arminius convinced Verus to alter their route. Instead of taking the known, safe, and open path, the Romans ventured into an unknown area, the Teutoburg Forest. An enigmatic place, filled with mud, marshes, and trees that blocked visibility. The terrain, perfect for an ambush, and very different from the clean and orderly land Rome was used to dominating. Despite warnings from some Germanic tribes loyal to Rome, who tried to alert Verus about the trap being set, he dismissed the risks. Confident in his advisor, and unaware that this very man was plotting his downfall, he marched toward what would be his ruin. The Teutoburg Forest had never seen anything like what was about to unfold. From the dense fog, the first echoes of war were heard before the Roman army could prepare. Suddenly, a rain of javelins and arrows fell upon the Roman column. There were no war cries, only the deafening sound of weapons slicing through the air and the impact of projectiles hitting the Roman ranks. Chaos erupted in seconds. The Romans, accustomed to open battles, were unprepared to fight in such treacherous terrain. Their orderly formations broke apart, and confusion overtook the legions. The torrential rain caused their shields to slip from their hands, and the mud made each step a titanic effort. Arminius and his Germanic warriors, perfectly camouflaged in the darkness of the forest, attacked and retreated with the agility of ghosts, leaving the Romans trapped and overwhelmed. The narrow, tree-covered terrain prevented the Romans from deploying as they usually did. The Roman army, designed for open-field battle, was reduced to a desperate hand-to-hand fight, with no shape or order. The ferocity of the Germanic attack left no time for maneuvers, and the Romans began to fall one by one, trapped in a deadly snare. As the battle dragged on, desperation began to take control. The Roman legions, once proud and feared, now fought merely to survive on terrain they could not control. The incessant rain and mud continued to drain their strength, but the worst was yet to come. Amid the chaos, Varus, the Roman commander, realized that defeat was inevitable. The massacre was not only visible in his eyes but could also be heard, the screams of fallen legionaries, the sound of Roman bodies being dragged through the earth, and the relentless fury of the enemy that never ceased. In a final act of desperation, and to avoid the humiliation of being taken prisoner, Varus decided to take his own life. With his death, the morale of the remaining troops collapsed. Other officers, seeing there was no escape, followed his example. Surrender was no longer an option, and with panic taking hold of what was left of their forces, Roman resistance disintegrated entirely. Without leadership, without hope, and surrounded by Arminius's warriors, the few survivors were mercilessly annihilated. The carnage was total. The defeat was so crushing that the Romans would never be able to erase the memory of that humiliation. Among the horrors of the massacre, there was one loss that affected Rome more deeply than any other, the fall of the legionary eagles. The eagles were not merely standards, they were the soul of the Roman legions, symbols of honor, power, and unity. Losing an eagle in battle was considered such a great disgrace that it was seen as a national disaster. But losing 3 eagles, 3 emblems of Roman greatness, was something much worse. It was a blow to the very heart of the empire. The eagles of the Legio 17, 18, and 19 were captured by the Germans, an act that not only destroyed Roman morale but also left a deep scar on the psyche of the empire. The humiliation of seeing their most sacred symbols in the hands of the enemy was a wound that would never fully heal. For generations, Rome would seek vengeance, but it would not only be for the military defeat, it would be for the lost honor, the very soul of their army, fallen in the darkness of the Teutoburg Forest. The impact of the defeat at Teutoburg resonated far beyond the battlefields. Rome, which until then had seen itself as invincible, had to reconsider its expansion plans. The conquest of Germania, an ambition that had seemed within reach, was effectively abandoned. Emperor Augustus, who had succeeded in consolidating a vast empire, was forced to acknowledge that the dream of incorporating all of Europe under his rule was too costly in lives and resources. In the years that followed, Rome did not abandon the struggle, but its efforts became retaliations, not attempts at conquest. Under the leadership of General Germanicus, Rome carried out a series of punitive campaigns to avenge the humiliation suffered. But while these expeditions were tactically successful, they failed to restore Roman hegemony in Germania. The empire's border was set at the Rhine River, and that barrier would remain for the next 4 centuries. The defeat at Teutoburg not only marked the end of Roman expansion in that region but also the beginning of a new reality for the Germanic tribes, who now saw a future independent of Roman influence. The Battle of Teutoburg is not just a dark page in the annals of Roman history, it is a lesson that remains relevant today. Although it happened more than 2,000 years ago, the Roman defeat in that German forest reminds us that even the greatest powers can fall if they do not understand their enemy or the terrain on which they fight. Today, in a world where great nations continue to expand their influence, Teutoburg serves as a reminder that blind confidence in military superiority can be fatal. The Romans thought nothing could stop them, but their lack of humility and their contempt for cultures different from their own led them to underestimate their adversary. This kind of mistake remains relevant, from politics to modern international conflicts. In a globalized world, the lesson of Teutoburg is clear: military power alone is not enough to ensure victory. Understanding context, respecting cultures, and strategic adaptation are essential for any nation seeking to endure. The Battle of Teutoburg was not just a military defeat, it was a catastrophe born of arrogance and deception. It was a massacre that echoed in the annals of history, the day when the Roman Empire, which believed itself eternal, came to know the true meaning of vulnerability. The annihilation of 3 legions, the loss of the sacred eagles, and the trauma to the Roman psyche sealed the fate of expansion in Magna Germania and set a border that would endure for centuries. Teutoburg is a brutal reminder that intelligence and knowledge of the terrain can overcome brute force. It is a clear example that even the most powerful empire can fall into the simplest trap if blind confidence clouds its judgment. If this story of disaster and resistance has impacted you, and you dare to explore the crucial moments that defined the fate of Rome, you're in the right place. On this channel, we unearth the battles that changed the course of history, the figures who defied fate, and the secrets hidden in the dust of the past. Thank you for joining us on this historical adventure. If you've made it to the end, your curiosity is what keeps this exploration of the past alive. Be sure to subscribe to this channel and activate the bell, you won't want to miss the next story.